The grown ups never believe me when I tell them about the time before. They pat my head and say I'm making up stories, that no one can remember being that young. But I do remember. I remember everything. My name is Kip, though back then we didn't really have names the way you think of them. We had sounds our mothers made, special calls that meant us and only us. Mine was a soft chirping trill that rose at the end, like a question. When I heard it, I knew food was coming, or comfort, or that it was time to move. We lived in the trees then, all of us together in a great sprawling family. Not like the trees you know, these were different, older somehow, with leaves that whispered secrets in languages I almost understood. The branches were highways, thick and strong, woven together so tightly you could run from one end of our territory to the other without ever touching the ground. I was maybe 4 seasons old when everything started to change. Old enough to climb on my own but young enough that mother still kept me close. She was beautiful, my mother, with fur the color of tree bark after rain and eyes that saw everything. She could spot a leopard in the shadows from 50 body lengths away, and her warning cry would send us all scrambling higher into the canopy. Our days followed patterns as old as the trees themselves. Wake with the first light filtering through the leaves. Stretch. Groom. Eat whatever was close, figs if we were lucky, leaves and bark if we weren't. Play with the other young ones while the adults dozed through the hot middle of the day. More eating as the air cooled. Find a safe sleeping nest as darkness fell. But that particular morning started differently. I woke to find mother sitting very still, staring down at the ground far below. This was strange. We looked down sometimes, sure, to check for dangers or to see if fruit had fallen, but we didn't stare. Staring at the ground was asking for trouble. What is it? I asked her, though of course I didn't use words like you do. I touched her arm and made a questioning sound. She pulled me close, wrapping her long arms around me. I could feel her heart beating faster than normal. Down below, moving through the tall grass, was a group I'd never seen before. They looked like us, sort of. They had the same basic shape, arms and legs and heads where they should be. But they were walking. Not climbing, not swinging, but walking on just their back legs like birds do, except they weren't birds. Strangers, mother signed with her hands. Dangerous strangers. But I wasn't scared. I was curious. These almost us creatures moved so strangely, so confidently across the ground. One of them, smaller than the others, maybe close to my age, looked up and saw me watching. Our eyes met across that impossible distance, and something passed between us. Recognition. Understanding. I don't know. But in that moment, I wanted nothing more than to climb down and meet them. Mother had other ideas. She grabbed me roughly and swung us away, deeper into our territory. But I couldn't stop thinking about those ground walkers. Where had they come from? Where were they going? Why did they choose to walk when they could climb? The rains came early that year. Usually, we had warning, the air would grow heavy, the insects would sing different songs, and the old ones' joints would ache. But this time the sky simply opened without ceremony, dropping water in sheets so thick you couldn't see the next tree over. We huddled together in the biggest tree, all 40-something of us pressed close for warmth. The babies cried. The old ones grumbled. And still the rain came. Our beautiful highways became slippery death traps. Food was impossible to find. On the third day, young Pip, my favorite playmate, lost his grip and fell. We heard his cry cut short and then nothing. His mother's keening lasted until her voice gave out. That's when grandfather did something I'd never seen before. He climbed down. Not all the way to the ground, he wasn't crazy, but lower than any of us usually went. He tested each branch carefully, his ancient hands still strong and sure. When he found what he was looking for, he called us down. It was a cave of sorts, a hollow in the massive trunk of a grandfather tree, big enough for all of us if we squeezed. It was damp and smelled of fungus and bat droppings, but it was shelter. We packed in like fruit in a pod, grateful for the warmth of each other's bodies. But the rain didn't stop. Days passed. Our stomachs went from grumbling to silent. The babies stopped crying, a bad sign. And still the rain came. We took turns venturing out to look for food, but the trees were bare, stripped clean by the water and wind. That's when I saw them again, the ground walkers. They were moving through the rain like it was nothing, carrying things I didn't understand. Bundles of sticks? Rocks. They had found shelter too, but not in a tree. They had made something, built it themselves from pieces of the world around them. I watched them whenever I could, fascinated by their strange ways. They had fire, actual fire. Kept alive somehow despite the rain. They shared food in ways we didn't, passing it from hand to hand, making sure everyone got some. And they made sounds, complex sounds that weren't quite like ours but seemed to mean specific things. Mother caught me watching once and cuffed me hard. They are not us, she signed emphatically. They are wrong. Broken. Lost from the true way. But were they? As our family grew weaker, theirs seemed to thrive. When old Nan died on the 7th day of rain, we couldn't even give her a proper goodbye, just pushed her body out into the storm and tried not to think about it. But when one of their old ones died, I watched them do something extraordinary. They dug into the ground, making a hole. They put the body in the hole and covered it up, then sat around it making their complex sounds. It was like they were keeping the dead one with them somehow, even after death. The rain finally stopped on the 10th day. We emerged from our shelter like ghosts, thin and shaky. The world had changed. Trees we'd known our whole lives were gone. The familiar paths were broken. And the ground was everywhere, no longer hidden by the understory but bare and open and terrifying. We tried to rebuild, to find new paths through the broken canopy. But it was hard. Food was scarce. The young ones were weak. And predators that had never been able to reach us before were suddenly a constant threat. That's when the unthinkable happened. Grandfather called a gathering. We all came, even the sick ones, because when grandfather called, you answered. He sat in the center of our circle, his old eyes bright with something I'd never seen before. We must change, he signed slowly, making sure everyone understood. The old ways are breaking. The trees are failing us. We must learn new ways or die. The reaction was immediate. Hoots of outrage, displays of anger. My own mother stood up, fur bristling. We are tree people, she signed frantically. We have always been tree people. Our mothers' mothers' mothers were tree people. And where are they now? Grandfather asked quietly. Dead. Like Nan. Like Pip. Like we will be if we don't adapt. He pointed down, toward the ground where the strange walkers had made their camp. They survive. They thrive. We must learn from them. It was blasphemy. Chaos erupted. Some supported grandfather, mostly the younger adults who had also been watching the ground walkers. Others, like mother, were horrified at the suggestion. The argument raged until well past dark, something that never happened. We always found our sleeping places before the light failed. Always. But that night, we argued under the stars. And as we argued, I made a decision that would change everything. I climbed down. Not all at once. I was scared, my heart pounding so hard I was sure predators could hear it from miles away. But branch by branch, I descended. The ground, when I finally touched it, was strange, soft in some places, hard in others, and it didn't move the way branches did. I had to learn a whole new way of balancing. I took one step. Then another. My body wasn't really built for this, my arms were too long, my legs too short. But I could do it. I could walk. That's when I heard it, a sound behind me. I spun around, expecting a leopard or worse. But it was the young ground walker I'd seen before, the one who'd looked up at me that first day. Up close, I could see how different we were. His face was flatter than mine. His body was straighter. But his eyes were just like mine. Curious. Intelligent. Alive. He made a sound, one of their complex sounds. I didn't understand it, but I understood the gesture he made next. He held out his hand, palm up. In it was something I'd never seen before, a piece of meat, cooked by their fire, smelling like nothing I'd ever encountered. I shouldn't have taken it. Mother would have been horrified. But I was hungry, and curious, and young, and sometimes those things matter more than should or shouldn't. I reached out slowly and took the meat. It was the best thing I'd ever tasted. The boy, for that's what he was, just a boy like me, smiled. It was such a familiar expression on his strange face. He pointed to himself and made a sound. Tor, he said. Then he pointed at me, questioning. I understood. He was sharing his call sound, his name. I pointed to myself and made my mother's special trill. He tried to copy it but couldn't quite manage. Instead, he made a simpler sound, Kip. And just like that, I had a name. Tor led me to their camp. I should have been terrified, but I wasn't. These strange ground walkers looked at me with curiosity, not hostility. An adult female, Tor's mother, I realized, made worried sounds and gestured at the trees. She was asking where my family was. I pointed up and made our gathering call. High above, I could still hear the argument raging. Tor's mother looked sad. She understood what those sounds meant: discord, fear, change resisted. They didn't try to keep me. After sharing more of their fire meat and showing me some of their tools, sharp stones that could cut, sticks that could dig, they led me back to my tree. Tor helped me climb the first few branches, his ground walker hands surprisingly strong. Kip, he said again, pointing at me. Then he pointed to himself. Tor. Then he made a gesture I understood perfectly. It meant tomorrow in a language that needed no words. He wanted to see me again. I climbed back up to find chaos. Mother grabbed me, checking me all over for injuries. When she smelled the fire meat on my breath, her eyes went wide with horror. You went down, she signed, not a question but an accusation. I went down, I confirmed. And I lived. And I learned. The argument that followed split our family in two. Grandfather supported me, said I was brave, that I was the future. Mother and others said I was corrupted, contaminated by ground walker ways. Some wanted to exile me. Others wanted to follow my example. In the end, we compromised, as families do. We would stay in the trees, but some of us, the curious ones, the brave ones, the desperate ones, would learn ground walker ways. Just in case. Just as backup. I became a bridge between worlds. Days in the trees with my family, learning the old ways from mother even as she despaired of my ground walking contamination. Evenings on the ground with Tor and his people, learning new ways, fire keeping, tool making, walking upright until my back ached. The two groups began to interact more. Carefully at first, then with growing confidence. We taught them which fruits were safe, which leaves could heal. They taught us about fire and tools and the strange marks they made in the dirt that somehow held meaning. Not everyone approved. Some of our family moved deeper into what remained of the forest, clinging to the old ways. Some of their group moved on, seeking new territories. But some of us stayed, in this strange middle place between tree and ground. I grew taller that year, my body changing in ways that surprised me. My legs grew longer, stronger. My back straightened from all the walking. I could still climb, would always be able to climb, but now I could walk too, and run, and carry things with my freed hands. Tor changed too, becoming broader, stronger. We hunted together now, combining his ground tracking skills with my tree spotting abilities. We were an effective team, bringing back more food than either of us could alone. The second rainy season was worse than the first. This time, we were ready. The two groups worked together, building shelters that combined the best of both worlds, partially in strong trees, partially on raised ground, covered with clever roofs that kept the rain out. We stored food, dried meat, and fruits the way Tor's people had taught us. When the storms came, we weathered them together. But the world was changing faster than we were. The forests were shrinking. The grasslands were expanding. Predators were evolving, becoming smarter, more dangerous. Other groups, some like us, some like Tor's people, some something in between, competed for resources. It was during a particularly bad dry season that everything came to a head. Food was scarce. Water scarcer. Our combined group had grown too large for the territory to support. Fights broke out, not play fights like when I was young, but real conflicts over resources. That's when grandfather made his last great decision. He was old now, so old he could barely climb. But his mind was still sharp, his vision clear. We must split, he announced at a gathering. Not in anger, but in wisdom. Some will go north, where the forests are still thick. They will keep the old ways alive. Some will go south, to the grasslands, and become fully ground walkers. And some. He looked directly at me and Tor, some will go east, to the place between, and become something new. It was heartbreaking. Families split. Friends separated. Mother chose north, clinging to the trees and the old ways. She begged me to come with her. "You are my baby," she signed, tears making her fur wet. "My only surviving child. Please." I wanted to go. Part of me would always be tree people, would always hear the leaves whisper and feel safest in the high branches. But I looked at Tor, at the others who were like us, caught between worlds, and I knew where I belonged. "I will always be your son," I told her. "But I cannot be only what I was. I must also be what I am becoming." She held me one last time, grooming my fur the way she had when I was small. Then she left with the northgoers, and I never saw her again. Our group, about 30 of us, half from each original tribe, went east as grandfather had suggested. It was hard at first. We were neither fully tree people nor fully ground walkers. We were something in between, something new. But that's exactly what the world needed. We found a place where the forest met the grassland, where we could climb when we needed safety and walk when we needed to travel. We built homes that were neither fully nests nor fully ground shelters but something uniquely ours. We developed our own ways of doing things, combining the best of both worlds. I became a teacher, showing the young ones how to both climb and walk, how to read the signs in both the trees and on the ground. Tor became a maker, creating tools that no one had imagined before, tools for climbing, tools for walking, tools for building. We had children, Tor and his mate, me and mine. And those children were different from us, better adapted to this dual life. They could run faster, climb better, think in ways that surprised us. They were the future grandfather had seen. Years passed. Seasons cycled. We heard stories sometimes, from travelers. The northgoers were struggling, their forests shrinking year by year. The southgoers were thriving but changing, becoming something barely recognizable. And us? We were surviving, adapting, becoming. I'm old now, older than grandfather was when he made his great decision. My fur is gray, my joints ache, and I can't climb the way I used to. But I can still walk, and I can still remember. The young ones don't really believe me when I tell them about the before times. They can't imagine a world where people only lived in trees, or only on the ground. To them, using both has always been the way. They don't understand what a revolution it was, what it cost us to change. But sometimes, when I'm sitting in my favorite spot, a platform built between two trees, high enough to be safe but low enough to see the ground clearly, I watch them playing. They swing through the branches with an ease I never had, then drop to the ground and run with a grace Tor's people couldn't match. They are what we became, the bridge between worlds made flesh. And I think about Mother, somewhere in the shrinking northern forests, if she survived. I think about Tor's parents, out on the endless grasslands. I think about all the choices made, all the paths taken and not taken. Change is hard. It's scary and painful and sometimes it breaks your heart. But it's also necessary. The world changes whether we want it to or not. The only choice we really have is whether to change with it or be left behind. Sometimes at night, when the young ones are asleep and the forest is quiet, I climb as high as my old bones will let me. Up there, where the air is thin and the stars are close, I can almost hear it, the whisper of the leaves speaking in that ancient language I once almost understood. But now I hear something else too. The wind across the grasslands. The crackle of fires in the distance. The sounds of a world transforming. Tor is gone now. He died 3 seasons ago, the way ground walkers do, suddenly, his great heart simply stopping one day while he was teaching the young ones to shape stone. We buried him the way his people taught us, but we also sang for him the way mine did, sending his spirit up through the branches to the sky. Another bridge between worlds, even in death. His son leads now, along with my daughter. They're wiser than we ever were, seeing solutions where Tor and I only saw problems. When the great cats learned to hunt us on the ground, they taught us to build barriers. When the tree sickness came and killed half the forest, they figured out which trees were resistant and planted more. They don't just adapt to change, they create it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you about the middle years, the hard years, when we almost didn't make it. It was maybe 10 seasons after the great splitting. Our group had grown, taking in wanderers from both sides, tree people who'd been forced down by forest loss, ground walkers who'd been driven from the open lands by larger groups. We were becoming a proper tribe, with our own ways and customs. That's when the others came. They were like us but not like us. Changers, we called them, because they seemed different each time we saw them. Sometimes walking, sometimes climbing, sometimes doing things we couldn't understand. They had tools we'd never imagined, stones that held edges sharper than anything, sticks that could throw smaller sticks great distances. At first, we tried to avoid them. They were too strange, too unpredictable. But they kept coming closer, setting up camps at the edges of our territory. Their children would watch our children playing, their eyes hungry for something we couldn't name. The conflict started over water. There was a spring, you see, the only good water source for days in any direction. We'd always shared it with whoever needed it, that was our way. But these changers, they did something we'd never seen. They built walls around it. They claimed it as theirs alone. The debate in our group was fierce. Some wanted to fight, we were stronger, better climbers, we could drive them off. Others wanted to leave, find new territory. But my daughter, wise even then, suggested something different. What if we learn from them, she said. Not become them, but understand them. Know their strengths and weaknesses. So we sent envoys. I was one of them, old enough to be respected but still spry enough to run if needed. What we found changed everything. The changers weren't one group but many, all pressed together by the same forces that had driven us to change. They had tree people who'd learned to walk, ground walkers who'd learned to climb, and everything in between. But they'd never learned to work together. Each group kept its own ways, suspicious of the others. Their leader was a woman old as stone, with eyes that had seen too much. She looked at me for a long time before speaking, and when she did, it was in a language I almost understood, part tree people whistle, part ground walker grunt, part something entirely new. You are the bridge people, she said. It wasn't a question. We have heard of you. The ones who kept both ways. I nodded, not trusting my voice. Teach us, she said simply. Our way is failing. The groups fight. The young ones suffer. We need. She paused, searching for words, we need what you have found. It wasn't what I'd expected. I'd come prepared for threats or negotiations, not this raw honesty. But looking around their camp, I could see the truth of her words. Tree people huddled in one corner, trying to build nests on the ground. Ground walkers clustered separately, attempting to climb with bodies not built for it. And between them, the young ones, caught between worlds with no bridge to help them cross. We taught them. Not all at once, trust takes time to build. But slowly, carefully, we shared what we'd learned. How to modify climbing techniques for bodies that were changing. How to walk efficiently when your proportions were still shifting. Most importantly, how to see both ways not as opposition but as complement. In return, they taught us their innovations. Tools we'd never imagined. Ways of thinking about the world that opened new possibilities. They had developed something they called counting, a way of keeping track of things using marks and sounds. It seemed like magic at first, but once understood, it changed how we planned, how we shared, how we thought about the future. The water dispute resolved itself once we started working together. We removed the walls but built better systems, channels to direct the flow, pools to store it during dry times, ways to ensure everyone got their share. It was so obvious once we stopped thinking in terms of ours and theirs and started thinking us. But not everyone was happy with this new alliance. Some of our people felt we were losing our identity, becoming too much like them. Some of theirs resented learning from outsiders. And from the north and south came pressure from the purist groups, the tree people who saw any ground walking as betrayal, the ground walkers who viewed climbing as backward. The crisis came during the fire season. Lightning struck dry grass, and the flames spread faster than anyone could run. Our combined groups were directly in its path. The old way would have been every group for itself, tree people going high, ground walkers running far. But we'd learned better. Working together, we created fire breaks, something the changers had known but we'd perfected. Tree people used their climbing skills to clear branches that might spread the fire overhead. Ground walkers used their speed to create bare earth barriers. And those of us in between coordinated, communicated, made sure everyone knew where to go and what to do. We saved most of our people. Not all, fire is hungry and fast, but more than either group could have saved alone. The victory celebration that night was something beautiful. For the first time, there was no separation. Tree people sat on the ground without fear. Ground walkers climbed low branches to share food. The young ones played together, learning from each other. That's when I knew we'd become something truly new. Not tree people who'd learned to walk or ground walkers who'd learned to climb, but something else entirely. A people of both worlds, of all worlds. My daughter took a mate from the changers, a young man who could craft tools with one hand while hanging from a branch with the other. Their children were marvels, adapting to whatever the world threw at them with an ease that made us old ones shake our heads in wonder. The world kept changing, of course. The forests continued to shrink. The grasslands grew but also grew more dangerous. New groups appeared, some friendly, some not. But we were ready now. We had our ways, flexible ways that could bend without breaking. I taught the young ones everything I could. Not just the physical skills but the stories. How grandfather had seen the future. How mother had loved me enough to let me go. How Tor and I had built the first bridge between worlds. They needed to know where they came from to understand where they were going. Some of them went on to build new bridges. My grandson became a traveler, moving between groups, sharing knowledge and stories. He came back once with tales of people who lived by great waters, who had learned to swim like fish and build floating platforms. Another bridge between worlds. My granddaughter stayed and became a keeper of memories. She developed ways to mark stories on bark and stone so they wouldn't be lost when the tellers died. I didn't understand it at first. How could marks hold memories? But she was patient with my old mind, showing me how each symbol could hold meaning, how meanings could combine to hold stories. Now your story will live forever, grandfather, she told me, showing me the marks she'd made. Long after we're gone, others will know about the first bridge. It made me cry, seeing my life reduced to scratches on bark. But also proud. We'd come so far from that frightened child watching strange walkers from the trees. The last time I saw my mother's territory, I almost didn't recognize it. The great trees were gone, cut down or dead from disease. In their place, scraggly second growth and grassland. But in one corner, protected and tended, stood a grove of the old trees. The northgoers had become gardeners, protecting what remained of the old world even as they slowly adapted to the new. I found cousins there, children of those who'd left with mother. They looked at me with wonder, the legendary Kip who'd chosen the ground. But when I showed them I could still climb, still speak the old language, They welcomed me. She talked about you until the end, an old female told me. Said you were brave. Said you were right. Said she was proud. I stayed with them for a season, teaching their young ones the middle way. Some were ready to learn, tired of the shrinking world of only trees. They came back with me, adding their strength to our growing people. Because that's what we'd become, a people. Not tree people or ground walkers or even changers, but something new. We called ourselves the adapters, the ones who changed with the world instead of despite it. Now I sit here, ancient beyond my own understanding, watching the newest generation play. They're different from us in ways that sometimes frighten me. They make tools we never dreamed of. They think in patterns that hurt my old brain. They look at the world and see possibilities where I see only the past. But that's as it should be. Each generation builds on the last, reaching higher, traveling farther, understanding more. The bridge Tor and I built was just the first of many. Now there are bridges everywhere, between forests and grasslands, mountains and valleys, rivers and seas. Sometimes the young ones ask me if I regret it. If I wish I'd stayed in the trees with mother, kept to the old ways. And I tell them the truth, yes, sometimes. When my joints ache from too much walking. When I dream in the old language and wake with no one to share it with. When I remember the simple certainty of a life with only one path. But then I watch them, these marvelous children of change, and I know we made the right choice. The world was never going to stop changing. We could either change with it or be left behind. We chose to change, and in changing, we became something greater than we were. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in colors that remind me of Tor's first fire. Soon it will be dark, and I'll climb down from my perch, slowly, carefully. These old bones aren't what they were. I'll join the others around the evening fire, share food and stories, watch the young ones learn and grow. Tomorrow they'll face new challenges I can't imagine. The world will keep changing, faster and faster, in ways that would terrify the child I was. But they'll be ready. They have the tools, not just the stone and wood ones, but the important ones. Flexibility. Cooperation. The ability to see bridges where others see only barriers. And they have the stories. My story, Tor's story, all our stories woven together into something stronger than any individual thread. They know where they came from, these children of two worlds. They know the price of change and the cost of refusing it. I won't be here much longer. I can feel it in my bones, the way grandfather must have felt it. But I'm not sad. I've seen the future, and it's bright with possibility. These adapters, these bridge builders, these children of change, they'll go on to do things we never dreamed of. They'll face challenges we can't imagine and overcome them in ways we couldn't conceive. And somewhere, in whatever comes next, there will always be those who remember. A child sitting between worlds, watching strange walkers with curious eyes. A boy reaching out his hand in friendship across an impossible divide. Two peoples becoming one, not through conquest but through understanding. That's the real bridge we built, not just between trees and ground, but between fear and hope, between past and future, between what we were and what we could become. And as long as that bridge stands, as long as there are those willing to cross it, we'll continue to adapt, to grow, to become. The stars are coming out now, same stars that watched me take my first steps on the ground all those years ago. They've seen so much change, these ancient lights. And they'll see so much more. But that's tomorrow's story. Tonight, I'm just an old man with memories, sitting between worlds one last time, grateful for the journey and all who shared it with me. Tonight, I'm still Kip, the bridge builder, the first of the adapters, the child who dared to climb down. And that, young ones, is enough.